Welcome back. For our second hot copy, a former lawmaker is questioning the Energy Department's move that allows foreign companies to conduct large-scale geothermal projects here in the Philippines. Attorney Terry Ridon, former House Energy Committee member and now Infrawatch Philippines convener, calls it unconstitutional and against the Mining Act of 1995. He now joins us via Zoom. Good morning, sir, and thank you for joining us on the program.
Hi, Christian. Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Okay, this was a big move coming from the Department of Energy, but this was actually not a surprise. They already mentioned this, I think, a few months back. But is this allowed under the Constitution, allowing 100% ownership in large-scale geothermal projects here in the Philippines?
Well, under the 1987 Constitution, it is not seen there. The Constitution only allows the exploitation of mineral resources, and it does not speak of the exploitation of large-scale geothermal energy. So I think the Department of Energy has been making legal calisthenics or legal fiction in forcing onto the public and forcing into foreign investors that large-scale geothermal projects can in fact be allowed under whichever law, whether under the 1987 Constitution or whether under the Mining Act of 1995. And I think very important is the fact that under the Mining Act of 1995, geothermal energy is expressly excluded in its definition of a mineral resource. DOE has been saying that, well, under the Renewable Act, it is mentioned as a mineral resource. But the fact of the matter is, in the list of laws that the renewable law has repealed, it has not included the Mining Act of 1995 as one of the laws that it is actually expressly repealing, particularly on the question of whether or not geothermal energy is being excluded as a mineral resource. So all of these questions come to the fore in determining whether or not the Energy Department is correct in its new policy towards the large-scale geothermal projects.
So in short, they cannot invoke the Renewable Energy Act of 2008 to justify this? Because that is the main argument.
Basically, they are subjecting foreign investors into shaky legal ground. And what we are saying is many people will basically raise the question on first, whether this is constitutional, and second, on whether there is a conflict between the renewable law and the Mining Act of 1995, because there is an express prohibition. And as far as lawyers are concerned, and we are a lawyer, hindi ho pwede yung pong ganyan.
So in short, if you are a foreign investor and you want to invest in large-scale geothermal projects here in the Philippines, given the legal question that you mentioned, it would still be risky?
It would be definitely be risky for investors to undertake large-scale geothermal projects for as long as this question on whether or not this is allowed under the Constitution and whether this is allowed under the Mining Act of 1995.
So this can still court a lot of cases. Possible question.
Yeah, that's correct. And I'm actually very much concerned on why the Department of Energy is pushing this at this point. Because as you know, the Renewable Act is not a new law. It was passed, I think, 11 years ago during the time of President Arroyo. And this policy has remained unchanged under Mrs. Arroyo, under President Aquino, and we are wondering definitely why we are pushing for this more than midway to the term of President Duterte. And I think the fact of the matter is when you look at investments in geothermal projects, you would see there, as an example, in 2009, Aboitiz Power was able to invest $240 million into the Makban Geothermal project. It is a factor of 4.8 towards the investment threshold which the Energy Department wants at $50 million. So I think the point is basically Philippine firms can actually undertake large-scale geothermal projects, and we are quite unsure why the Energy Department is insisting on this? And secondly, why is the Energy Department insisting on such a very small threshold investment amount of $50 million towards large-scale geothermal projects? In I think, a more blunt context, $50 million is basically lesser than the net worth of two of the country's senators. So that is something that should give us pause on whether or not this is the correct policy towards large-scale geothermal projects.
So what do you think is the reason if you're saying that our domestic companies or businessmen can actually handle those geothermal projects, the large-scale ones? I mean, what do you think is the reason why we're opening this up to to foreign investors at this time?
Well, to be fair to the Energy Department, of course, they would want all types of investments to pour into the country. But like what I said, this is something that is a protected sector within the energy industry. And if Filipino firms can, in fact, invest this amount of money towards geothermal energy, regardless of size, regardless of the amount of investment, I think it should remain so unless and until legislation has in fact been passed to basically resolve the investment risks that we are mentioning, particularly on whether or not the Constitution allows large-scale geothermal projects to be undertaken by foreign firms, and whether the Mining Act of 1995 allows geothermal energy to be defined as a mineral resource.
Okay, now beyond the legal questions, beyond the constitutional issues, as a matter of policy, do you think it's really high time to open this industry to foreign investments?
Well, again, like what we had stated, if Filipino firms can in fact be given preference in this sector, I would say that this should remain under Filipino hands. And in fact, as late as 2017, Filipino firms had in fact invested 20%, not in the Philippines, but in an Indonesian geothermal plant. And the investment, I think, and as we had been calculating it, stands at around $455 million. So I think by and large, it is not the capacity of Filipino firms to make investments in this area is not difficult, and it is not subjected only towards one or two firms. So I think for as long as the regulatory environment, the legal environment remains shaky, I think we would rather that large-scale geothermal projects be confined towards Filipino firms.
Okay, now just for context, that's why this is very important. This is a very important discussion. I think this is still the situation now. We are the largest producer of geothermal energy in the Asia Pacific, right? So basically, there's a lot of production coming from the Philippines, but there are two ways of looking at it. Should we keep the business or the industry within Filipino hands, or we should also logically open it to more investors? I mean, that is a debate here. Because it's one big industry.
Yeah, that's correct. But when you speak of investment, it doesn't need to be just about like equity investments. In fact, I think as far as foreign involvement in geothermal energy is concerned, in terms of providing credit, the foreign investors have in fact been doing so. As an example, the ADB, the Asian Development Bank, has issued $225 million in terms of climate bonds to local geothermal companies. And I think this is an example in which they had adjusted towards the actual regulatory environment that we currently have, but these are foreign funds that are being poured towards domestic investment. So I think there should not be any problems towards foreign involvement in geothermal for as long as it does not impinge on current equity issues, equity requirements in this sector.
So in short, we can stick to the current arrangement, 60-40, at least here in this industry. Okay.
Yes, that is correct. And now, up until such time that there is clarity on legal questions on whether or not large-scale geothermal projects are in fact allowed to be owned and controlled by 100% of foreign firms.
Okay, now I saw a portion of your statement regarding this and I'd like to seek your clarification. You said, kung merong dapat unahin ang anti-corruption drive ng Pangulo, maganda unahin siguro to. What exactly were you insinuating here?
Yeah, that's correct. Because it's really surprising, Christian. Because firstly, is there a necessity towards this at this point in time? Like what we have stated, Filipino firms have in fact been investing.
When I have back with us former Congressman Terry Ridon. Earlier, we were talking about a portion of your post where you said that kung merong dapat unahin ng anti-corruption drive ng Pangulo, maganda unahin siguro ito. You were saying?
Yeah, we're really quite surprised at the very low threshold in investing in large-scale geothermal projects. Like what we said, mas marami pang pera yung mga senador.
Yung
Kasi
50
dito po sa
million.
hinihingi nating 50 million. This is just 2.5 billion pesos in terms of investment threshold. And just for context, the Makban Geothermal Power Plant, how much was the investment there? 240 million. Inflation adjusted, $346 million. The investment of AC Energy in Indonesia for 20% stake, $600 million. As an example of the FTAAs, yung pong mga mining contracts, which is basically what the Energy Department wants to happen with geothermal projects. The DPO mining, $790 million. So basically, ang layo po, yung in terms of investment value, ang layo po ng mga to, doon po sa $50 million na minimum investment po towards large-scale geothermal energy. So basically, these are so many red flags. That the investment value is a first red flag. Second red flag would be, ayun na nga, ang dami yung questions on the legality, on the constitutionality of this new energy proposal, parang pilit na pilit naman po ata. So, ang proposal ko to the Energy Department, baka mas magandang pag-isipan po muli, umupo po tayo kasama yung iba't iba pang mga stakeholders dito po sa sektor po na ito to determine, kaya po ba talagang ikasa ito pong bagong patakaran po na ito at kung hindi kayang ikasa, ano po yung dapat gawin? Baka kailangan po ng legislation towards this end.
Okay, now let's move to a related issue here. Of course, there might be insinuation of possible problems with this particular move by the Department of Energy. But let's move to another equally important topic, which is the establishment of a mega task force by President Duterte to investigate corruption in the entire government. It's important to talk about this because your group has been closely watching infrastructure projects, particularly those done by the Department of Public Works and Highways. And from that, it snowballed into an investigation covering the entire government. How do you look at this effort by the Duterte administration at this stage in his administration?
Well, again, like what we had previously stated, we would want to see a little bit of focus on which agencies the president would want to undertake an inquiry on, particularly on corruption. Because it's surprising because the memo states the entire government. So it's possible that there might be a little bit minor corruption issues that again might be subjected to inquiries. But we trust Secretary Guevara's resolve in having a focus on the things that matter, the big fish, the large-scale corruption issues that are important to be investigated upon by government. And I think, of course, as our group is also concerned about this, we would also want to be able to participate in a specific corruption issues in several agencies as well.
Okay, former Congressman Terry Ridon, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Christian.